I'm gonna level with you guys and be super honest right now. Astolfo is my favorite fictional character of all time. Not only have I made 2 full-length animated music videos with just Astolfo in them, but I've also made numerous Astolfo animations over the years. I own Astolfo manga, I own Astolfo drawings, I've made original Astolfo drawings like this one, I own Astolfo figures, fine literature, I have an Astolfo game, I'm wearing the Astolfo shirt, I even have this. So needless to say, I knew I couldn't let my boy down and I had to make this the highest quality, best character model I've ever made. You know, no pressure, right? But how exactly do I even do that? Did I reach this goal? Let's jump right into it. And right before we get into it, I want to talk about today's video's sponsor, me. My low poly character modeling series that teaches you how to create your own 3D characters, just like the one we're about to create, is on sale now. And if you use the code HOLIDAY2024, you'll get an extra 15% off through December 19th to the 31st. More on that later in the video, but if you're interested, link is in the description below. I did something a little bit different this time when I was drawing and coloring my turnaround. I actually started by taking a bunch of screenshots of Saber Astolfo's 3D model, which someone actually ported over to Gary's mod, so I literally just used the pose tool to T-pose that Astolfo on a green screen map. Then I took pictures, 360 pictures of it from every angle and traced on top of that. Now I know what you're wondering, tracing, isn't that bad? Well, as a tool for learning, no. None of what I trace here ended up in my final drawing. It was more so to get ideas of what the proportions and aspects of this costume are like so that I can then exaggerate those in my turnaround drawing and really make sure I'm fully understanding them in order to make this as accurate and faithful of a model as possible. And this is yet another step that I wanted to take in order to make sure this model was as high quality as it could be. And at this stage, I'm largely just trying to figure out what's going to actually be a 3D model versus what's going to essentially just be painted on Astolfo, which would be details like the belt. And how I shaded Astolfo here was heavily inspired by the 3D music videos I made, because I already had a very specific way I did lighting and shading in those videos, and I kind of wanted to replicate that. I was definitely worried about the twin tails, right? They might get super complicated when we're doing the actual 3D modeling, shading, and rigging, but surprisingly, those were not so bad. There were many other things that proved way more challenging than the twin tails on Astolfo here. 3D modeling here, I started with my last low poly model, Modius from Helltaker, as a base for the torso and skirt here. Now, I don't know if this actually ended up saving me much time considering how much I had to edit it, but there you go. I used my low poly Love-chan's hair as a base for Astolfo's hair, which certainly did save me a lot of time, however. Her hair is a part of my low poly parts pack, which is a part of the low poly course that is currently on sale. If you want to get access to all of these low poly parts you see on screen here, in order to greatly speed up your modeling process, make sure to click the link in the description below because it's currently on sale for a limited time. You may notice that I'm trying to mirror as many of my models on Astolfo here as possible, and there's good reason for that, because when I start UV unwrapping later on, my work will automatically be mirrored to the other side, so that's not only going to save me a bunch of modeling time, but it's going to save me even more time when I get to the UV unwrapping stage of this process. Modeling the sleeves here became pretty challenging because it is ultimately a very unusual shape, and a lot of the detail actually does need to be in the 3D model for it to be accurate, and the inside of the sleeves are actually supposed to be red, whereas the outside are, you know, that white color, along with all those designs around the sleeves towards the end of them. So it was very challenging to recreate it, but ultimately in the final model, I think it does look pretty faithful. And this model ended up being a lot higher poly than the rest of my low poly models I've been making this year. It ended up being about 3,000 polygons versus my usual, which is, you know, around 1,000, give or take. Some end up less than that, but others end up more than that. To start out with my UVs, I always start by cutting and pasting parts of my turnaround drawing directly into my texture sheet. Then I'm projecting faces from my 3D model using the project from view option in Blender and aligning them with all the different parts of my texture map and just slowly iterating and refining on them. I really pushed myself to be as accurate to my turnaround drawing as possible here, and it was very challenging to get it looking right, especially the hair, because there's so many little shading details and interior lines that I had to recreate or find a different solution in order to get looking really polished and make sure that the face was as good looking as it could look. The top he's wearing here was really tricky because I did not properly align it from all angles in my turnaround drawing. Whoopsie! So it actually proved very challenging to get that looking correct in 3D. but eventually I was able to pull it off by using a whole lot of trial and error. I ended up modeling his eyelashes as 3-dimensional geometry so that I could have them visible through his hair strands in 3D here, just like they are in my turnaround drawing, as you can see here. And I'm actually very proud of how this turned out. It looks really neat. I also gave him a blush which was copied straight from Modius, and I'm just constantly referencing my turnaround drawing as I'm going throughout this process in order to make sure I'm nailing the shading and replicating how it looks as best as I can. Something to keep in mind is that I'm losing all the external outlines from my drawing in the translation from 2D to 3D. I only have those interior outlines in my actual 3D model here because I'm painting those by hand. So I really have to make sure I'm selling these hand-painted textures really hard and make sure that I have highlights in my shading to make it pop. The sleeves are really tricky, especially all those little designs they have on the end there. I was able to eventually figure something out that kind of worked pretty good, and the gold shading was a lot of fun here. I love making things look metallic and shiny. In order to make my stylized face rigs, I first make sure that I have a texture map just for my character's face. Then I make the eyes on this face texture transparent and make sure to use the transparent input on the BSDF node of my image in Blender in the shader editor. Then I place irises into my texture map with a transparent background behind them, so I just have the irises isolated on a separate part of my texture map. Then I spawn in planes that I project my iris texture onto in Blender. Then I put those iris planes inside of my 3D model's head, and then I 3D model the white of the eye inside my model's head. After that, I added eye controller bones right on top of my iris planes that I made that are children of my rig's head bone, meaning that they're going to fall around every time I rotate or move my head around. Then I weight them to each bone 100%. So on each bone, they are weighted 100% to each iris controller bone that I just made. Then I draw multiple and eye mouth expressions on my face texture and add a controller to switch between mouth and eye expressions on my rig, which we cover how to do in this tutorial right here. Then you're done. You have a super expressive and animatable mouth and eye shapes on your rig, and you can even move your irises around. Super cool. As usual with my rigging, I start by spawning in a basic human meta rig that I align with my model, then do a first pass of automatic weights that I then refine over time before moving on to adding bones for things like hair, twin tails, bows, sleeves, armor plating, and more. Plus, this model's eyebrows and irises are rigged and posable, making this model very expressive indeed. And here you can see me drawing the extra facial expressions that we'll be able to animate between, because I am setting this model up in a way that we can have animatable facial expressions directly on our rig. Then I'm putting them into a pose to test out all of our rigging so far before we finally move on to... This is going to be the primary animation that showcases this model to the world, and in my case here, I really wanted to make an idle animation inspired by fighting game idle animations. And I even used Cammy's idle animation from Street Fighter 6 as a reference. I love animating idols like this, especially when I get to animate all the flowy parts like Astolfo's hair, sleeves, bunny ears, and all the individual bow ties. Just making them look as smooth and cute as possible is always just such a joy. Before we wrap things up and I share how this model and animation turned out, I really just wanted to thank you all for such an amazing year that we've had on this channel. We started this year with 3,000 subscribers, and now we're at well over 20,000 as of recording, and we've reached nearly 200 students in my low poly modeling series on Gumroad, with over 10 perfect 5-star reviews from you all. This might be the last video I release on this channel for the year, so again, huge thank you for the continued support, comments, and encouragement you've all been sending my way. And by all means, if you are interested, make sure to pick up the low poly course today in order to lock in the absolute best possible deal you'll get on it this year. But with that out of the way, without further ado, let's see what the final Astolfo 3D model and animation ended up looking like.
Saber Astolfo! よし、いっくよ。はいパーフェクトだね。
If you have any characters in the low poly style you'd like to see me create next, make sure to comment them right below. I love hearing from you. But in any case, if you want to jumpstart your journey into making low poly characters, make sure to check out the Gumroad version of that series, because it has a bunch of bonuses that are greatly going to speed up your character creation process. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.